Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association. Our conversation today is the 8th in our spring event series themed Art and Resistance, produced in collaboration with Davidson College. My colleague, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, our students and I are delighted to welcome Miriam Ibrahim into our virtual classroom. But before our discussion begins, as always, I'll ask Emily to please share a little about our work here at Davidson before introducing and turning the virtual microphone over to Miriam and our students. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. We are so honored to be able to invite Miriam Ibrahim to our class, to Davidson College, and to the BGHRA today. Today is November 22nd, 2022, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our students are nearing the end of our 13th week together in our German 231 class entitled Black German Art and Resistance. This class is conceived of in 3 parts. It is first a survey course in the fields of Black German studies and diaspora studies, Black diaspora studies in Europe. Second, it is a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work and will feature our final projects on the BGHRA archive. And it is, most importantly, an opportunity for students and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities to speak with people whose lives and work lie at the intersections of artistic expression, resistance and activism, and identity, among many other things in modern day Europe. For today's class, I would like to thank my colleagues in German studies here at Davidson. Thank you to Drs. Burkhard Henke, Maggie McCarthy, and Scott Denham for your continued support and encouragement. And thank you to Amber McIntyre, our administrative assistant, for making these visits this semester possible. So as always, in a moment, Dr. Pena and I will fade away into the background and play moderators for the remainder of our time together. We'll allow our students and of course Miriam to have the floor. Our students have prepared questions based on many of the performances that Miriam has sent, as well as some a piece of writing that she shared with us and a few other things. And so we're looking forward to engaging with that and with her. So with that, I will introduce Miriam and then turn things over. So, German and Ethiopian Miriam Ibrahim was born in Stuttgart in 1981 and began singing and acting at school. After graduating from high school, she attended the Stage School Hamburg, where she graduated with her degree in singing, acting, and dancing in 2005. Miriam has appeared in many productions since then, including Mother Africa at Schauspielhaus Hamburg, Witch Hunt at Theater Bonn, and Hair at Theater an der Roth. Additionally, she taught acting at the Backstage Gruppe Hamburg and for the Bin. In 2009, Miriam moved to New York City and attended the Stella Adler Studio, where she graduated in acting in 2011. In the same year, she founded The Shades of Grey, with which she realized her own original plays and performances, such as Wunschkonzert, Sterntaler, and Vestiges. From 2013 to 2016, Miriam attended Freie Universität Berlin and graduated with a bachelor's degree in theater studies and social cultural anthropology. She entered at Maxim Gorki Theater Berlin and Staatsoper Stuttgart. And she assisted John Gold-Rubin in New York City and Armin Petrus before joining the Kammerspiele in München as assistant director for the 2017 through 2019 season. There, she realized different formats, workshops, and installations, such as the workshop Safe Place and theater, the opera Lady Magnesia, and street performance Speaker's Corner Repeat, the conversation format Tisch Zehnen Reloaded. In January 2020, she directed a play at the Münchner Kammerspiele on the topic of doing and undoing race and identity making. And with the Staatstheater Augsburg, she worked on a play on the topic of post-colonial relations in 2021 called Klang des Lebens. She is a permanent dramaturg at Theater Oberhausen, and in January 2022, she moved to the Schauspielhaus Zurich as a dramaturg. On December 10th, 2021, her production, Tausende Serpentinen Angst, or 1,000 Serpentinian Fears, a novel written by Olivia Wenzel, was premiered in December 2021 at the Staatstheater Hannover. Miriam Ibrahim is part of the dramaturgical team now of the Schauspielhaus Zurich and a freelance director, among many other things, I'm sure, and we're excited to hear more. So with that, I'll turn things over to our students and to Miriam, and let's get started.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited what kind of questions you have, or if you just want to share some thoughts or want to also introduce a little bit before you speak who you are and why maybe you're in this class, so I know who I talk to.
Kenny, do you want to sort of begin?
Yeah. I'm Kenny. I'm a sophomore. Sorry, my voice is kind of weird. I'm just getting over the flu. And I'm in this class just because I was looking for an extra class for the semester, and I took some German earlier my freshman year, and wanted to kind of keep within the program and stuff, and the topic looked really interesting. And so going through all the videos and performances you sent, one of my questions was dealing with the off Broadway show. I was wondering about it seemed just like a hugely audience interactive performance, like with the chairs being pulled out on them during the performance and stuff, and like how do you get an audience to be so interactive with this performance, and what were the choices that went behind making this, and how does it send the overall message? And I guess you could talk about that performance as a whole, because we didn't really get it was just a snippet of it, but it seemed very interesting, so I was wanting to learn more about that.
You're talking about Sterntaler, I think, which I did in New York City with a dear friend of mine, now Dobashi, and also live music, a violin player. Where did I start? Why did I do this piece? I wanted to work with this actress, now Dobashi, very much. And we were brainstorming and talking, getting to know each other, what interests us. And at that time, I really loved fairy tales. Now I have a more critic approach to fairy tales, but at that time, I still loved fairy tales, and we picked Sterntaler because it's a dear fairy tale of mine since I'm a kid, and I had a lot of associations with it. A poor orphan child has nobody takes care of her, and she's basically selling flowers to survive, and then also selling matches to survive. And in the winter, nobody really buys anything from her, and it's so cold that she's lighting up the matches till the last match. But during that time, she meets other people, poor people, and she gives everything away. She still has shoes and her last shirt. And in the end, she dies because she gives everything away, what she still has, and she's freezing to death. It sounds horrible when you explain it like that. But as a kid, I mean, the way it's told as typical fairy tales, you don't understand the horror of some circumstances. And it was about interacting and about wanting to get in touch with people and the desire of that we are not just individuals, that we should open our eyes up to people in need. But the focus was more this young person who's so poor but gives everything away. And I think we didn't focus just on the horror of the circumstances, but on this wonderful gesture of interacting and giving from your heart. And now Dobashi is Japanese, lived at that time in New York City, and she worked on Buto. And she had also a bit of a crisis with a society that's very greedy. And for her, this story speaks to her heart. And so we wanted to just raise awareness and touch people to be more empathetic, I would say. And because now she was working with Buto and acting, I wanted to combine Buto and acting together. And I love setups where the audience is not in their comfort zone. So you question, okay, where do you gonna do this performance? What resources do you have if you do off Broadway? So we had like the studios from Stella Adler where we could rehearse and perform, or we rented just a small, acting studio, which is like a small black box. And then I was thinking, traditionally, how would you tell fairy tales? Usually you tell fairy tales just in a circle or sitting on the floor or sitting on the bedside. So I wanted to break off this setup where audience is on one side and the stage is on the other. I wanted that the whole room is the stage, and that there's almost no border between audience and performance. So it gets really intimate. And so we built a circle, and we didn't decide that the stage is inside the circle. The stage was all around, behind the people, in the center of the circle. And we started rehearsing without audience, and we just followed our heart and step by step what came to us with the movement. And we combined English and Japanese and acting and movement and Buto. And then we had, to the end, we had some guests, friends over to stand in for audience members. And I remember when we loved the scene where her whole life of this performer changed, the whole world changed. So we decided that the setting has to change because everything is changing. And also the anger and the emotion of changing the world and having aggression within that, we wanted that audience that they feel it and that they have to move themselves as well if they encounter this kind of emotions. And now was also asking me, so what do I do when a person doesn't stand up from their chair? And say, just try, and if not, you would just let him or her, or the person, sit there. And And because I knew audiences in New York City quite a bit at that time, I thought most of them, after the actor tries once or twice, they would stand up and be irritated, and then also don't know, do I sit down again? Where do I stand? But that's what I wanted. I wanted the confusion. I wanted that they don't know where they belong, because this is what I wanted them to feel, how it is when the circumstances or your world is turned upside down. You don't know how to behave anymore or where your place is. And so it always worked. It was always fascinating to see that. It was always a different show. It was always a different scene. And now had, of course, to play. It's not even playing. She really lived that. So you also can question, is that acting or is it a happening or like a performance itself? I like to mix these kind of styles. And one time, I think one person didn't get up, and she knew she tried so hard, but without, being physical towards the people. It was just like basically the chair, without hurting or with no violence in that sense. So she tried, and then all the chairs were removed in a different setting. And then this one person, I don't even remember if that person then in the end stood up himself and took the chair. I'm not like, it's been too many years, but I think this is fascinating, and every theater group should try these things to question the boundaries of audience and performance, and where's the stage and what belongs actually to the stage. I like to play with these things. Did I answer? Did I miss something?
Yeah. That answered most of my questions. I was just impressed by like how I think the audience started reacting really well too, because I saw people like preemptively sit up like before their chair was pulled, and also they at one moment they were also like all gathered in one corner of the room. So like, did that also work, like where she was able to just like push people into one side or the other, or like do stuff, like she seemed to have like it's the audience responsibility too, but like to kind of adjust to what's going on?
Every time it was different, where the audience went to, and we performed it in different spaces. I think the video we did was within a set of a different play, which because it was in our school, like in the studio, and we just said it doesn't matter. We also created this piece so we can do it anywhere. We could, like, people can invite us to their big living room, or we also played it in a rooftop. That was fantastic at night. So depending on the space, the people move differently. But for the actors, it was clear. Everybody sits in a circle. My task is to break the circle down and form a formation, like a typical formation of two lines of chairs. And I think this association of two lines of chairs then maybe is again an invitation for the audience then to sit down, because then some people sat down again, some people didn't. Depending on how the collective works within the audience, if one is interesting, if one person does something, it's like sitting down again, then more people join. But if nobody's if nobody's doing a move, then there's a lot of hesitation. Yeah. Oh, and then when there are theater people coming, they're more comfortable with the situation. So then you can tell, okay, they're comfortable, maybe they're even actors, so they're not scared so much. Then other people who don't go so much into the theater, they had claustrophobic emotions, they were very emotional, and some even said, I'm not sure if I liked it because I had these emotions. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that, actually, not to butt in right at the beginning here, but in terms of, so we've talked very briefly about Brecht and the Verfremdungseffect, right? So in what way is your strategy there creating like this discomfort among the audience, right? Related to that or inspired by it, or how is it different? And I guess what is the aim of this discomfort? To get people to think differently, or what's your aim there?
So I think I didn't study much Brecht, but I was socialized in Germany in German theater. So I know I'm socialized with Brecht style and Piscator and many, many others, but also I was studying in New York City. So I learned about method and psychological acting, and I love Netflix and films. So I like all these kind of performances. I love Abramovich. Like I like when people perform with their bodies, even soccer games and sports game, all these kind of theatrical moments. And the way I think of theater is not that I use a certain kind of style like Brecht, Verfremdungseffekt. For me, though, when I was studying at Stellar and watching amazing movies, that everything is realism. I love when it's good, especially in the movies, but in theaters, I get bored even watching it. When it's like one-to-one realism. I think then, for me, then the movie is better as a form, because it can get so close and it's even more realistic. And then in the theater, when you sit all the way up and you watch a realistic piece, you want to be much closer. So I think I remember I created the Shades of Grey because I want to do more avant-garde. I want to mix stuff. I don't want just realism. I want to use the body. And why I want to use the body, I want to discover what is unspeakable. So where we don't have words, even when we have the text of wonderful authors or text of writers, I love it. And I want to use text. And I love the craft and the art of acting, but there are so many styles of acting, which I also learned. And all of them are fantastic. So why should we just focus on realism or, and I don't even know what kind of names the styles have, but there are different kind of styles. Brechtische Verfremdung, which nobody uses here, by the way. There's no style of acting. It's maybe just opening the fourth wall and then sing a song. It's basically just breaking a line of a flow. And when you break it, that's already a Verfremdungseffekt. And so for me, the aim is to make unspeakable visible or like greifbar, like
Tactile.
Yeah, like you can feel it, you can touch it, you can, but you have no words. You maybe have to sit down and write a thesis on what you actually mean, but you can do like one scene and it's all there, and even more than you can write down. So this is what I always am interested in working. What do we discover when we pick a piece, and what do we learn more, and how we can make this visible? So I create exercises where it's without words, where we work with bodies. So I do a workshop it's a bit Artaud. I don't know if you know Artaud. He was also saying, how can we find new expressions? How can we go think outside of the box? And when we study acting, theater, we are so much in our boxes that that then again, when you go into the laboratory, I call it in the theater, where you just need to break these boxes, and you have to question, how can you break boxes of your thinking, of what you see, and how you express things. Like, what is the box I have when I'm an actress and I put myself in the scene? All identities I question. All the way we behave, I question. So I'm not working on Verfremdungseffekt as an effect or a style. I'm questioning, how can we find expressions we haven't known yet.
Thank you so much. That's, yeah, brilliant. I think it's really exciting and lots of potential there.
Yeah,
All right,
I love
I'll be
and
quiet.
continue talking about Verfremdungseffekt. And I think, you know, I then later on, when I went to Berlin and studied theater, I had problems because I was like, how can you think about theater that way? My first semester was just like, so yeah, then you watch Brecht stuff and you watch that, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. At that time, maybe it was crazy to break the fourth wall, and yeah. Even when you question, I think this is also important. For me, the actors who I work with are persons with personality and history. I cannot, for me, it's not exchangeable. The way I work with them is I want to know what they think. I want to know how they feel about the topic. So they are real collaborators in creating the whole piece. And so sometimes the actor, him or herself, has a part within the piece, although this actor might have 3 other roles to play. So I'm interested in the swapping as well. Who is you, and what is you, and how does it look like, the transformation into the other thing or other figure, and how does it look like if you mix it? So I like again, there are boxes and borders, how we think this is possible, and I like to play around with that, which some actors have a lot of problems with it in the beginning.
Thank you. All right, who's next? I'll be quiet now.
Any other question or thoughts?
Yes. Hello, I'm Gadir. I'm a sophomore and I'm from Egypt. I'm in this class because I was interested in the relationship between art and resistance and how art looks different in each culture. Or, I don't know. I used to say tribe, but I don't like that word now, so I'm going to say culture. And I was really interested in what you just said about breaking the fourth wall and putting the audience out of their comfort zone. And I was wondering, how does the participation of the audience change the performance, if it does at all? How does their participation or enthusiasm or not enthusiasm change how the performance goes?
It does. I was in Egypt. My auntie is from Egypt, so you reminded me now of that time with my auntie in Alexandria. I never did theater there. I think this is a very important question. Where do you do theater? For who do you do theater? And different countries, okay, that's for sure different. But even different languages, and also different in one city, depending on where you are and you do theater, is different, like because of the different backgrounds. So it's always different. New York and off Broadway audience is mostly people people you know, they're coming. So I would say it's a bit of a more secure audience. But I did now at the time, I did more experiences as a director, as a dramaturg, and as an audience member. And it's very fascinating, the question you have. I think you can write books on that. So with Sterntaler, we just did it in New York City, but we did it a couple times. And again, the space itself changes how the audience reacts. But depending on are there theater goers in there, are there performers themselves in there, changes the way they behave. I would say if I would do this piece in Ethiopia, I'm not sure if I would do it that way. Like, you know, I always, when I create, if I create this in this way that it's not just it's just performance where you can watch in a distance. I think, of course, where do I do that? And what and how to dress? Like, if I would do it in the village where my father comes from, and like, definitely a round circle would work, but just the dress itself, just the undressing is impossible, for example. Talking about religion, by the way, I think depending on what kind of religious background and the culture, what is okay and what is not okay, for the society, you have to know what kind of taboos or rules or there are, so you know when you reach a danger zone, or like what's the word, yeah. And I with Sterntaler, I think for New York City it was not provocative at all. Yes, we changed the chairs, and in that moment, but in a different piece, I didn't change the chairs, but I built the seating areas myself, and they were very uncomfortable because you could not lean back. They were just different kind of wood blocks, some in a good height, some really low, uncomfortable, and so they're different heights, and some were just standing platforms, and the audience were 1.5 meters apart. So I wanted them to feel isolated and uncomfortable because it was a piece on suicide. That was the Wunschkonzert, and we did it in an old church on top, like in the rooftop of the church, and I took my clothes off. So in one scene, I took my clothes off. I was nude. I wouldn't do that again, but I did that at the time. And because maybe I was so in that piece, and I washed myself. Like, I took a bucket of water and poured it on top of me, and then I washed. And I couldn't do that again in many other ethnic groups, cultures. And I did not create the piece for that. I created the piece for New York City at that time, in space, in that church, huge, massive space.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think there's also, again, a lot to talk about audience reaction. I was an audience member in many pieces in Germany where they like to do these things, where they like to do immersive theater, I think they call it. And sometimes I hate it myself. Like, I do it, but the way they did it, and the way they make me feel. And sometimes it's like a game and you have to work so hard. I'm like, I didn't come here to work hard. but still a fantastic to experience. And I experienced a lot of different ones, a game or a dinner. Yeah.
Well, I'm Isaac. I am a junior here at Davidson. And I think actually, I started taking this class because I'm very interested in the diaspora and how it's kind of transcended culture in different areas of the world. But one of the things that I was wondering is you mentioned that you were really fascinated by fairy tales. And I was wondering, was there a specific reason, or is this because of almost like a feeling of nostalgia when you look over your work or anything?
Yeah, I don't like them anymore so much because I got more a critical whiteness perspective on it. And also I think it's very brutal in a way, but that it can be interesting, of course. Brutality and the darkness of humanity are inside these fairy tales, and I think that's why I'm still interested in them, but more critical. Like Snow White, come on, what bullshit. And I also, that girls always want to be fairy like princesses, fuck that. And then we have to be skinny and nice skin, and we wait for the prince. And I mean, there are so many messages there, just like so bad. Like, I mean, I have body issues, and I do think it comes, of course, from the media, but also from fairy tales, because I was brought up from fairy tales. My mom, my German mom, it is a tradition. And we had no cell phones, and yes, we had TV, but it's a cultural tradition that you read fairy tales or you get told fairy tales. And we need new fairy tales. Come on. I mean, like, it's racist, it's sexist, it's just bad. And that's why I would do fairy tales, to just rip them apart. And at that time, when I did Sterntaler, I wasn't so much aware on the problematic themes. But the way I did it was, I think, exactly, I just, we ripped it apart, and we chose what we want to tell, and what was important for us. So basically, we didn't tell the story of Sterntaler. We didn't. We used it as an inspiration and as a base to discuss. Did I answer? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Grace, do you have a question?
Yeah, and so the course and the series is called Art and Resistance, and I think a lot of, like, we've been having discussions for a few weeks now about, like, is art always resistance? Or so I really wanted to hear your perspective about, like, do you intend your art to be resistance, and is it perceived as resistance by just other people?
Very good question. I think I will think about this even more. I had to fight so hard to get a stand, to get access within theater spaces. So whatever I do is resistance within that. And this is, again, I think we have to look locally, or, where, as the other question was, depending on where you are, the resistance is a different ones. a different one. And depending on who you are and what privileges you have or what accesses you have or which ones are denied and what you do with it is the resistance itself. If you're female, I wonder anywhere it's the resistance. So, but for me, I really know for sure that even when I was a kid, the question of what do I want to be was so colored by the race and gender and class. I think everything of the social constructions or social identities. And at that time, I didn't even know. I hadn't, like, we called ourselves differently, which we don't call ourselves anymore. But we didn't belong because we were mixed race. So I remember my brother and I speaking about that. So we didn't belong really in Ethiopia. We didn't belong in Germany. But even you meet other people who are not mixed race, who don't belong because of their race or skin color. And I think I was shaped already as a kid that I supposed to be a good singer and a good dancer, just the way I looked. And I wanted that then. You're not that aware to either you rebel and you don't want it at all, or you want that because people see that in you. So I'm not sure. I became a singer and then I went that route, but I remember that I then, I sang soul music and I loved Aretha Franklin. All this Black culture was my culture because I was put into that from the society. But my Black culture was Ethiopian culture. There was no Aretha Franklin. But anyway, that's how the society was wanting to see me. And even in school, even in the teachers, not all of them, not everybody, but the majority. So until you discover there's something wrong in identity making, and the question is who you are, and you don't want to question that early on because it shatters your whole existence, but it happens in waves with me. And I think it's that there was a regular resistance towards stereotyping me in school, and I would say the expression on that also varies, very different. I have to think on what strategies there were, what the resistance looked like. Many different ones, but definitely a long time I was angry and upset, and I lost a lot of friends because I was outspoken, but I had no good language to prove my point. Everybody was saying she's angry. Everybody is saying she's sensitive. All these things you read now in these wonderful books, I have read and I have language for it. So everything happened to me as well. But it was shocking because you then also realized that you saw yourself that way. It's like what Frantz Fanon wrote in the 60s, like you although maybe it's not bad imagery, but you sometimes I'm not sure, like I love soul music and all that, but if, like, who knows if I would be seen differently. I played basketball for 9 years. My brothers and my cousins, they had, we were pushed into the Black culture, and we don't mind. And now we're proud to be Black, but we have to discover and live our own Blackness, because they're so diverse, to be Black, to be female, to be, you know. So coming to today, I had to fight hard to become a director, and I'm fighting right now to be Black dramaturg in a white institution. I'm the only Black dramaturg, and I just know, I think, 4 Black dramaturgs so far in Germany, in German-speaking theaters, and even there, the resistance is just being there and speaking up every time, and sometimes not, because you're just tired. And as a director, it is like people are thinking your topic and what your interest is not valid for the audience. So you need to learn how to, again, prove a point with words. So you need kind of to educate yourself in a way that you can then argument that what you want to do is valid. And that is a double thing you have to do, because you need to basically sell and prove that what you want to talk about and show is valid for theater, because they talk about audience, and the audience is white and all that, but also they talk about art. There you go. What aesthetic is good aesthetic, and where does it come from, and who decided that this and this and this and this is good aesthetics, and this is good acting, and this is good speech, and this is beautiful, and this is ugly. So I think the resistance as a Black female director is in almost everything I do, in the books I read, in the bath I take, and taking care of myself, in the conversation I have with all the dramaturgs or the theater artistic directors who now come and say, hey, Miriam, do you want to work with us? And say, yeah, I want to work with you, but what kind of space is this? So, and then, you what do you want to see? What kind of piece do you want me to do? Shakespeare, Goethe, Schiller? Hey, I want to do this new author, Sharon Otto, for example. She wrote a new novel, and I want to do it. And then it's like, or Miriam, which I will do the poems, but until people are interested and believe that what you have to say is valid and quality, you need to fight in different ways. And a lot of people give up. I think so. This is resistance. And within the work itself, to give other people of color space to perform and being not alone is something very new. So I think most of people of color who worked with me, I am the first person of color director they work with. And I speak openly on discrimination and racism within the space, which is very new. There's a lot of tears, there's a lot of trauma that comes out, and you need to have this, you need to give it space. And then I sometimes also wonder, so I do this work and how can I put it? Like, you have visions for aesthetics as well, but you need to take time for these emotions. And you cannot push sometimes as far as other directors do. So sometimes you don't get that far with aesthetics because you want a different work environment. So this is also resistance, I think. And the last piece in Hanover, there were 3 performers, and they were all people of color. They never had, like, it never happened. And it was very interesting for the white people within the group, like my assistant, for example, who never experienced that white people are a minority within a group. And suddenly there's a shift in the conversation. And jokes, different rhythm. And then you wonder, like, how, this is crazy. So what kind of theater can be created within this kind of space? And I get lost because I did not have these spaces. So I'm like, sometimes you recognize, this is probably a white socialized behavior. Okay. So it's very with that, like, you know, what we talk about masculinity when you are working with majority female group, you notice these things. And it's the same with whiteness, that you notice these, that but you cannot find words right away, or you'll get overwhelmed with feelings. And then we did this piece, 1017 Angst, which was written by Oliver Wenzel, who is an Afro-German Black writer, light-skinned, writing about also being mixed race and the experience in Germany. And we had a safer space, a lot of safer space within working for the performers. And they said, as soon as we got into audience, they were scared, because they said, now I get emotional just remembering that there will be mostly white people sitting there, and they won't understand, and they will be angry maybe at some points. And it was true that with that some people were sitting like this, and they felt, you know, this typical steps. They felt ashamed, they felt angry, before they just could let this experience that was shared just be true and happen. They didn't do that, but they felt so moved by the pain and Verletzung, how do you say it?
Violence?
By the violence that racism puts onto people. So they were, I think, it is hard then for the performers to do this again and again, and it's a very different number for them if there's 10 people of color from 80 or just 2 or none. It never happens that there are 70 people of color and just 10 white people. It doesn't happen in German-speaking theaters. And I think the resistance for these performers is just being there and just do their work without being so scared, without holding back, and that's hard to give your best performance in those spaces. So I also can continue on resistance in my work as a Black female director or artist in Germany. Yeah.
How is it different in Zurich, or is it different in Switzerland than Germany?
So it's very right. In Switzerland, women were allowed to vote in the 70s, 76. So yeah, the way they rebel, the way they speak up about being oppressed, because it's also Switzerland, like they're neutral. and they are very rich. So the way they resist or rebel is different than in Germany. So I think Germans are not really, the Germans get discriminated in Switzerland. I don't encounter it because I don't look German so much, and even if I then speak German, which they of course then see it is German, I think I don't get the same response, and maybe I'm just used to certain kind of discrimination in a way that I don't even recognize it in a way. In the theaters, I think for the performances is very similar. So I was speaking to a lot of performers. It's a very, very one-to-one experience with stereotyping, with not getting access, being assimilated or alienated. Audience is very homogeneous white. I did not encounter a lot of people of color who do directing or dramaturgy, especially in city and state theaters. There are a lot of people of color who have their own companies, or they do off scene things, and they mostly also they raise these questions. The topic is on identity and racism and these things.
I have a question about, so you staged Olivia Wenzel's book, and you said you're planning on, or you already have staged Sharon's Adesfrau. Is that on the docket for your next project?
So I did a stage reading, which you are familiar, but the Swiss people weren't. So I did a staged reading on her novel. Like a short, of course, I made a script, and we did a stage reading, and I loved it, and the actors loved it as well. Audience who were there was very good experience. And I hope I can work with Sharon and her writing again. Now we are in a good contact and we want to work together. So let's see. But what I will do is Mayayim's poems, which will open in June next year, 2023. And I don't know yet. Like we can talk about it like after I've done it. I will work with 2 Black actors only. I know mixed race, and okay, what can I say? So I wanted to work with 7 performers, but the theaters, the Residenztheater only had 2 Black performers. They had more, but most of them left. So then I said, who's there? Because I cannot do this work with only white people. So there are 2, young, so I cannot get diversity on age or body size. So again, there we go with continuing in resistance. You need to continue, and you need, like, I cannot say, oh no, then I'm not doing it at all, because if I don't do the change, and if I don't go into these places and try, and again, there's the thing with aesthetics, I want to go there, but I don't have the Möglichkeiten, what I need. There are the circumstances for many other people, but the basic resources I need sometimes are not there. And then if you ask, then it's a long educational conversations, and you also feel sometimes shy, because sometimes I also don't know how to explain and educate, and often it says you have to watch out that they say it's reverse racism. Yeah. And so and you know, I know I want to do the work. The work is actually art. This almost first, you know, I love that's why I felt it was easier for me in New York, because I did not have to explain so many things, and the diversity was higher. Yeah, it's not there yet, you know, here.
When you're thinking about taking a novel or these poems and translating it into theater, what's that process like, and what kind of considerations do you make, I guess, in terms of shifting of genre?
Yeah, definitely. So which book should we talk about? Any book you want to talk about?
I mean, let's do Tausend des Serpentinen Angst, since you already did that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. The theater asked me to do the book, which I was delighted, because I knew it and I was happy, you know, although it was a bit matchy, but I loved this book, and I said yes. And then I read it again, and I let it speak to my heart first. So it's different than reading just for reading's sake. I did that before they asked, and I knew I loved it. So then they said, "You want to do it?" I said yes. So I read it, and then I read it, but I read it that I noticed where it touches me deeply. And it's not theory. I marked it. And the way, so it's a lot of overlapping, like intertwining moments. So I did that, and then there are conversations, and you read it again and again, right? Or while you read, there are conversations. So I asked, which space will it be? So I know what kind of imagination I can have. How big is the space? How much movement can I think? Or or can I think with video? And so I needed, for me, the space is a lot important, as I said before, the space and where and who. And then immediately I said, what kind of actors I need to do that. And you have the core, and then you have, of course, more, depending on the story. And then I asked, so I think, so there's a conversation with the dramaturg, and she asked me, how many people do you need? And it's not like how many can I get? It's okay. I need the protagonist, I need the brother, and I need the girlfriend, best friend, for sure. And maybe the mother. And was there? So basically, immediately it was 4. And then I said, and I want it like in the book. I want so brother and protagonist, female, who is no name really in the book, have to be Black or actually mixed. Do you have that in ensemble? And they did, because that actress brought the book to the dramaturgical meeting and said, we have to make that book. So interesting also what it, And she did the protagonist, and then the best friend and the girlfriend is Vietnamese German, or like, and I said it has to be. I cannot not do it like that. It's not at these times. Maybe in 50 years we can do it all Indian, or I don't know. And also, if you would do this book maybe in India, then it's different. But we're doing this book in Germany talking about Afro-Deutsche culture and how yes, and Black performers and stories aren't told or isn't given space, talking about representation politics, right? So we have to think where we do it and what history and what situation there is on identity politics and all that. So we had, then I said, oh, the mother, yeah, who do we have? And then I liked the idea, it's just the three and just people of color, because I thought maybe it will be interesting. We're just working with the young voices, with the book, within the book, and with the people of color within the book. And you know, the brother is dead, by the way. I mean, so yeah. So then I knew with who I could work and which figures will tell the story of the book. And then I went back to it and I organized it. But that's me, because 1017 is fragmented and jumps so much. It's a very beautiful element of showing trauma and how trauma works. But I needed to organize in order to understand what are the stories and what is important to take from each core event out of their lives. And so I organized it, and then while I organized, I marked again what is important from not missing out of these core events. And then basically that's how I made a big selection. And I read that selection, and a dramaturg read that selection. And while you do this work, you already, of course, have visions. And you talk while you do that with a stage designer and with a video designer. I start to collect music, and then then you go to rehearsal, and then you do a lot of body work, and you see who they are. You talk about their own experiences. Then you read some of the text, and then you let it flow and hear how it sounds, because you need to decide who's speaking what. And then it's basically like music jamming, like when you jam, and then the knowledge is not in theory, it comes within, and then everybody feels when it's right. And then and then we decided who's speaking what until and then that's table work. I do body language without work, I do table work, and then they had to learn the lines. And then they have to learn the lines, and then we basically improvise. I don't like to block like everything through, because I do this body work from the beginning. And so on top of the body work, later the text comes, and out of these experiments, we block them together.
We have about 1 minute left, and
wow.
The time flew by, but I do have a last question. Can you please let us know what in your work brings you the most joy? What makes you feel the most accomplished from your body?
The connection. the connections with the people I work with.
Wonderful. Well, we're very, very happy that you connected with us here today. So many, many thanks, Miriam, for joining us today and for leaving us with so much to think about. We are immensely grateful to Davidson College for making our conversations possible. And of course, our students whose participation makes these discussions especially rewarding. Today's recording will soon join our collection on our YouTube channel at Black Germans. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you will be alerted as new ones appear. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about future events and our upcoming conference. We hope that you've enjoyed today's discussion as much as we have. And until next time, thank you so much for your time and attention.